This year is out of control. Can you believe it? The final World Cup friendlies are upon us. Game on Friday, real early in the morning, by the way, for us on the West Coast. All right? 5:25 a.m. These games are being played in Germany. That Japan game is in Germany. The following game against Saudi Arabia will be in Spain. Players have already congregated in Europe to prepare for this. Fun, fun, fun. I'm still caught up on that early. I'll be up. Obviously, I'll be up. And everyone will be. But again, 5:25 in the morning. 11 a.m. for the Saudi Arabia game, Pacific time. The sacrifice that we make on the West Coast for you. And we want to make a big deal of this because we want to see if there's some alterations. Because we all know that the UST feels good, but not great. But what can be done? Well, you can't make these seismic changes. And they're not on offer here at this point. Greg Berhalter has a pretty good shot, depending if everyone's healthy or not, of who's going to start, who's going to make the roster. Those decisions have been made. And you could kind of tell based on who was brought in for this roster, which I think most people agreed was pretty good or expected. Everyone has their favorites that aren't going to be in there. And Jordan Pefok, I think we all agree we'd like to have seen Jordan Pefok because he is scoring goals. He scored again this weekend. Union Berlin's in first place in the Bundesliga. They played almost 2 months. First place. And he's been their top scorer. Well, for whatever reason, it's not happening for Jordan Pefok. I know there's some discussion that maybe he can slip in here. It is what it is. It's Jesus Ferreira. It is Josh Sargent, who did get in there because of his form. I think there's a good sign of somebody who's emerged. And also Ricardo Pepi, who scored finally for Groningen in the Dutch Eredivisie, but is here clearly, maybe without that goal. The selection was beforehand. It was just good timing, but it is a situation there where he is here because of what he did prior, and he feels comfortable in the group, and he wasn't going to be jettisoned. So there's not going to be a lot of things happening, but there's some things by necessity that need to be addressed. And we're going to talk about it here today on the Soccer OG. Check out the Soccer OG podcast, where all podcasts are available. iTunes, Spotify, you name it. Joining me this week, we will preview this U.S. men's national team roster and the 2 games against Japan and Saudi Arabia with ESPN U.S. men's national team insider Jeff Carlisle. Looking forward to that conversation. And check out the entire library of podcasts there at the Soccer OG. Big plans for the World Cup. I'm not going to get into it. We're finalizing a few things, but big plans. Thanks for all those who've tuned in. And like and subscribe us right here. So I have 3 big storylines to really buckle into when we start watching these 2 games. And there's 2 games. You got to take them with a grain of salt. You can't just put too much weight on this. This is more about the camp, right? And seeing how these players combine with others. But then obviously if they have a good game here or there, or if they have a bad game, it could make Greg Berhalter's job a little easier. 26 players brought into this. We'll start from the back, and really a huge story that hasn't gone away. We wish it would. Who's going to be the starting goalkeeper, right? Who is it going to be? Well, Zach Steffen not called in here as he was one of many players that are going to miss from some sort of injury or issue. Anthony Robinson, Yunus Musa, it's a long list. Christian Roldan, Tim Weah, Chris Richards, Cameron Carter-Vickers. So a lot of different players were brought in that were a little further down the pecking order and have to be thrilled, but also have to think, if I wasn't in the original 26, it's going to be an uphill battle to make this team. Still, they're here. So they got to feel good. Those guys include Eric Palmer-Brown. You also have, who am I forgetting? Mark McKenzie. And Johnny Cardoso got it in there. I was talking Eric Williamson, who still has a shot because there's going to be a bit of a camp in October for players on MLS teams that have been knocked out of the postseason. Maybe Williamson's on that list. Still, uphill battle. But Johnny Cardoso got the nod as the midfielder. I think they need a midfielder, and I talked about it. I was surprised with Cardoso. And I cover a lot of South American football, or futebol, as he is playing in Brazil. He's played well the last month or so, but prior to that, he didn't play a lot for Internacional Porto Alegre. So I know everyone likes the foreign player. And he has a huge upside. And Greg Berhalter was waxing poetic about Johnny Cardoso. I was still surprised that he got the nod, but he's going to take control of it. Maybe there's some sort of way into this squad for Cardoso, American-born, very Brazilian at this point. Again, I was just like, oh, it was odd. It was a little bit odd. And there's a chance that this team gets younger. And it's already the youngest team in the World Cup. I don't want them to get any younger. I don't want to get them any younger. In some cases, we have to deal with it, but most teams are 28, 29, 30 for a reason, their average age, as I addressed last week. So I don't want this team to go from 24 years age to 22 or 23. Alarm bell. Okay, maybe you want to build for 2026, but no, you don't want this team to be too young. This is a very young team. The older guys have been moved out. In many ways, I agree with most of it. You play to your strengths. You have better young players. But don't go completely young. So that's something I want to look out for, and I was surprised with some of the new players. Still, Cardoso has to think the same thing as Eric Palmer-Brown and Mark McKenzie. I wasn't in the original call-up, so this is an uphill battle. We shall see. Disappointing to see some of these guys not playing like Chris Richards, which we really wanted to see him get into that mix. And Anthony Robinson not being there is interesting. We'll get to that as well because it opens a door for a competition that we really need to look at because we're assuming Anthony Robinson's there. Yunus Musa, who's played so well, it's going to stink not to see him there because you wanted to see what he could do with Tyler Adams and fortify that midfield. That would have been a big story that we're not talking about. But let's start with the goalkeeper. Zach Steffen, good news, he did play over the weekend for Middlesbrough. We didn't know what was going on there. We thought he was being abandoned or something along those lines. But he's there. And Zach Steffen is a guy still has a chance to start at the World Cup, I think. Right? Still has a shot to get in there because of what he's done prior. That matters. He started a lot of games for the U.S., even though he's looked very spotty. A little too spotty for my liking and many of yours, I'm sure. But Ethan Horvath, Sean Johnson, Matt Turner are the goalkeepers here. Turner got some action here for Arsenal. I think he is going to be the number one. And really the only guy that can unseat him is Steffen, who is going to be on that roster that we're expected to be announced for the World Cup on November the 9th. Because of that, Sean Johnson may be making up the numbers. Ethan Horvath looks like he is the number 3. Who's going to be the starting goalkeeper? I would imagine Matt Turner starts the Japan game, if not both games. I'm sure you want to get some of these guys in there, but Greg Berhalter has to eliminate problems as much as he is. I'm curious to see who the guy is. I'm not 100% convinced it's Matt Turner, but I'm pretty sure it is. Maybe Zach Steffen gets back in here. We'll see with the lineups. It would make sense if Matt Turner's not getting games and you want him to be the number 1, you start him in both games. So that's going to be interesting to see if that's the direction that Zach Steffen or if Greg Berhalter goes. So that's the first big story, right? The goalkeeper. The second big story, without question, who is going to be the number 9? It's been an incredible revival for Josh Sargent. And I believe that by the end of the tournament, once we get towards the business end, that Josh Sargent will be our starting guy. So by game 3, when they play Iran, and in a round of 16, maybe Josh Sargent's the guy. There's no way, well, there is a way, but very unlikely that Greg Berhalter unseats Jesus Ferreira, who's had a good season with FC Dallas. I think FC Dallas are one of the 3 or 4 best teams in Major League Soccer. He's scored enough goals he's like 3rd or 4th in goals, and it's been a good season for goal scorers. You know, Hani Mukhtar's up there, he has 22, and Sebastian Driussi. Brandon Vasquez, who was not called in, which I was pretty sure was gonna be the case. It was just too late, even though a big guy like that makes sense. Ferreira and Sargent are your top 2 options. Ricardo Pepi, he's still there. And there's minutes for him at the World Cup. But it appears it's going to be those 3 guys. Jordan Pefok, I just don't see him getting in here now. Does he deserve it? 100%. I love what he has been doing. Could he be handy at the World Cup? Yep. He certainly could. He's just on the wrong side of the line. But he's ahead of Haji Wright. He's ahead of Brandon Vasquez. He's ahead of everybody else in that number 9 sweepstakes. But it is Jesus Ferreira who I believe will start the first game. Something horrible would have to go, or if Josh Sargent continues to score at an amazing clip, even if he does, as long as Ferreira doesn't go downwards, he is going to be the starter for the Wales game. But there's a very good shot because Josh Sargent's so perfect for this team. And Greg Berhalter and everyone even said it. We didn't bring him in earlier because he wasn't scoring goals. Well, he's scoring goals now. So he is doing everything that you need. All things even before or when we started this whole World Cup campaign, Sargent was the number one guy. Fell off a bit because of a bad 2021, 2022, but he's figured it out, and this is just brilliant news. So he is going to start at some point in the World Cup. It's going to be one of those two guys. Can Ricardo Pepi surprise us all? Sure. Greg Berhalter trusts him. Greg Berhalter appreciates him. He's put him into some very tough situations. He's made Greg Berhalter look good in that World Cup qualifier down in San Pedro Sula. It was a long time ago, and he hasn't scored a lot of goals. But still, Greg Berhalter has that connection with Ricardo Pepi. But it would be Ferreira. If Sargent starts that Japan game, then we can start talking about it, right? I like Ferreira a lot. I know it's not a huge group of people that rate him. He makes too much money in MLS. He would be in Europe anyway. And this guy it's going to be fun to track him because he does so many things well. He's an electric player. The only thing against him is that he plays in MLS, according to the masses. If he was moved and he had the trajectory of a Ricardo Pepi and was playing in Germany or Holland, different story. I guarantee you. The ship has sailed, I'm afraid, for Jordan Pefok. But that's the number 2 story is the number 9. And it's not a huge story because I still believe Ferreira Sargent. We're very relieved that Sargent's in the mix because imagine he didn't go on this tear. We'd be feeling nervous. There's people feeling nervous. I'm feeling nervous because of the injuries. You know, Cameron Carter-Vickers and Chris Richards. That means Walker Zimmerman and Aaron Long are going to be your center back starting pairing. That's going to obviously disappoint a lot of people. I'm not worried about Aaron Long. I don't know where this has come from about how poor he is. It's not. It's fabrication. Every time a Red Bulls team concedes a goal, everyone thinks it was Aaron Long's fault. The data shows you that he has not been on the hook for many of the Red Bulls goals. That's just it. I actually reached out to MLS to find that out. I was curious because none of these people are watching Red Bull games, right? People are critical of Aaron Long. They're not sitting there watching Red Bull games ad nauseum. The decision's been made as to where they think he lies. So Zimmerman's been spotty. You know, that's a little worrisome. Chris Richards is a super athlete that you'd want to get in there. He is our best defender. Not playing all that much for Crystal Palace, but I think his time is going to come. And Cameron Carter-Vickers was that 4th defender. James Sands looks like he's no longer in the mix. If Mark McKenzie and Eric Palmer-Brown made it before him, so James Sands probably paying a very high price for a bad dip at the wrong time. So yeah, we're worried about that. And this team has always got injury problems. So it would be naive to think that by the time the World Cup rolls around that we have a clean bill of health. We're lucky we have Gio Reyna and Serginho Dest back. But we don't have anyone. Speaking of Serginho Dest, to me, this is the one that I'm most curious about because I am 100% sure that Greg Berhalter is going to play Joe Scally at left back in one of these games. He's going to start Sam Vines in the other. And it's going to come down to maybe those 90 minutes to see who will be the backup for Anthony Robinson. He is injured. Because of that, I think Greg Berhalter has to really look at concrete reasons to pick a pure left back to be Anthony Robinson's backup in the event that they may have to play. And it's Vines and it's Scally. Moving Serginho Dest over was an option, and that would make way for right backs like DeAndre Yedlin and Reggie Cannon that clearly Greg Berhalter trusts and wants on this roster. And if he has to incorporate Sam Vines or Joe Scally, maybe one of those guys doesn't make it. But I truly believe the fact that both these guys are on there means that Greg Berhalter is saying, I want to see them. I'm going to pick one for the World Cup. I didn't think Joe Scally was going to make this. I thought he was still a little too green. He's had a nice season with Borussia Mönchengladbach. Nothing spectacular, but he's done a good job. And because of that, I think he has the inside track, playing for a top club in a top league. Sam Vines will have to do something spectacular to move ahead. If Joe Scally is solid in whichever game he plays, he's making it, which is an incredible story to see where he's come from. And he's been very well received. Berhalter did say about Vines, he's a guy that's in the form of his life. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. It's good because he's obviously here in the camp, but it's bad because maybe he says, what if he hits a different form? Yeah, I really believe that backup left back is the biggest up for grabs position remaining for this U.S. team. Other than that, everything is settled. Now we move on to see where and how far this team can go. And I feel good. I don't feel great, but hopefully there's not too much tinkering and we can lock down this team. November 9th is going to be here before you know it. We'll have recaps after both games on September 23rd and September 27th as we get ready to get closer to the marquee event. Rate, review, download, subscribe. Hey, hit the subscribe button. Go ahead. Tell a friend about the Soccer OG here on YouTube. And check out the Soccer OG podcast where all podcasts are available. And let's get going. Do you remember the 23rd of September? Is it the 23rd? It doesn't matter. I'll see you next time.